Are you going to do it more than 3 times? If so, automate it.
And if we're having conversations about that and that input goes back into ChatGPT or one of the tools, isn't that multimodal? And I was like, yes.
First thing you want to know when you're troubleshooting is where is the fusion happening in the process?
The next level for that, because you got the voice aspect, is then you got agentic features.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is September 16th, 2024, and you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. And that means today we are talking about what it's like to use a true multimodal model to start thinking out loud. And that's going to be a really good conversation today. And it's actually going to segue pretty nicely into tomorrow's conversations. Just giving you a little bit of a preview. Tomorrow we will be talking about the, O1 preview. Didn't even mean to do that. AKA Strawberry, AKA the new model that came out last week, but we're gonna deep dive into that. But we might talk about it a little bit today and how it factors in to the conversation. So let me tell you who we have today. We have Jyunmi, Karl, Beth, and I am Brian. And I think maybe the way I see this conversation sort of kicking off is, and this is just because I've been talking to a lot of clients about this, and I've been using the term, you need to start creating an AI first or having an AI first mentality. And they say, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, okay, let's hypothetically, you have your sales team, you have sales reps, and they're moving through their day and doing their processes. And then somewhere around the week or whatever, they go, oh, I could probably put that in the ChatGPT. And then they go and they open up the app to ChatGPT, or it could be other tools too, but let's just use ChatGPT. And they open it up and they ask their one-off problem question or whatever, and then they get a solution for it. And they go, hey, you know what? That just saved me probably 20 minutes of messing around, whatever. Fantastic. But then the tab typically gets closed. And this is me just reiterating what I hear from clients all the time, CROs and people like that, and marketing as well. It's like, they use it, Brian, but they don't, like, it's not around all the time. And I said, let me tell you what my day looks like. And we're not saying we're the poster child for this or anything. I said, but let me tell you the difference. I said, number one, ChatGPT never closes but there's always a tab open. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 because I don't want to lose the last one and I'm sharing. I said, sometimes there's a few. Claude is almost always open. Perplexity never closes. I said, that's the difference between the way I approach business these days and what you're explaining to me. And so I think that's a good start to today's conversation, because the reason I bring that up is over time, because we talk on this show, because of what I teach, what I instruct, what I build for clients, that I have developed an AI first mentality. And what I mean by that, I'd love to get your guys' feedback on this, is I always think about a net new task as, could this be done by AI? And then after that, I go, well, if not all of this could be done by AI, which parts could possibly be done by AI? Now, what does that mean? Well, first you have to have a process or, a stack of questions and answers and different pieces and parts to the solution. And you have to understand that, which is why we always say that AI isn't going to really replace the expert per se, maybe someday, but it still really does work best when you have somebody who deeply understands their area of expertise and is able to apply AI on top of that. So that's where we see a lot of the solutions. So that's now my thought process is always, could I do this faster with AI? Which is a lot different than I'm moving through my week, doing my typical tasks, and across the way I go, wow, that's going to be a lengthy task. Maybe I should open up ChatGPT and see if I can get a start for that. In my case, I would have already been there, already thinking about that going forward, and I would have started with ChatGPT. And if it failed me, I'm no worse for the wear. And this is where one preview might come into, and we'll talk about it more tomorrow, about how you can get some additional help with the reasoning. So now you have an extra tool and an extra set of hands, if you will, AI hands, if you will, that will sit there and quote unquote think for you to help you with the reasoning, to maybe put that structure in place before you get to this other part. So when we're thinking multimodal, we're thinking not just text to text, text in, text out. We're talking about all the things. And Beth, I know you're going to get into this because you sort of lit up a light bulb for me last week when you're like, hey, I said, well, that's not multimodal, is it, Beth? And you said, well, we're talking about having conversations. She's like, well, we're talking. And isn't that voice? And if we're having conversations about that and that input goes back into ChatGPT or one of the tools, isn't that multimodal? And I was like, yes. So, I think that's just, we want to expand everybody's brain today, right? We want to think about hey, you have all these different areas and inputs and outputs that you can use at your disposal. It's not just, let me write this one-off text prompt and get this one-off answer. It's much bigger than that. Okay, I'll stop there. That's just where my brain is going into this. But go ahead, Beth, take it from there.
So I just want to jump in and say multimodal means communication in a variety of modes, right? Modes of communication. There is visual communication. There is audio communication, right? Like being able to say something out loud that someone is taking in and hearing it. There's also like perspective in space, kinesthetic communication, which we don't really talk about with AI. Because that's more understood to be video, right? So you don't actually take an AI, an embodied AI and a robot and walk it around in space typically and explain how to do something, because that's not the most efficient right now. But you do a video of the things that you want the robot to do, and the robot can learn that way, right? Most of the multimodal AI LLMs, Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT. I did not forget ChatGPT, y'all. And Meta are not taking video input. But OpenAI demoed their visual input, which would be live video, right? Like you're not recording it as a video, but you're saying, look at this. And there are a bunch of things that Siri is expected to be context aware for your screen. So we're like moving in that direction where that kind of thing can happen. But two really simple examples. Allie Miller talks a lot about her mornings. Allie K. Miller on X and LinkedIn talks a lot about her morning process, where she gets up and she just talks to ChatGPT while she's getting ready, or she just talks to what the AI flavor of the moment is, and has prompts in that will then be able to organize the day, right? To draft context that she's looking for, draft. It has sped up her day. She's talked about, you can go read about the sort of things that she says. That is efficient and fast, right? You're talking, Brian, about can this be more efficient? Can something be faster? Do I'm able to do that while I'm walking around getting ready, right? Like I'm able to make use of non-sitting at my computer time, which is a real key. And the second point that I want to make in this context is the ability to screenshot something and just shove it to the model that can accept the image, which is Gemini, ChatGPT. I'm pretty sure Meta can do it too. I haven't played with Meta very much. It can make images, which makes me think that it can accept them. And Claude can accept them. Claude doesn't have a native audio interface. But so those are, that's like also really shorthanded. Picture is worth 1,000 words. Definitely when it's a picture of an error message and something happening within code or on your screen, like what? Like that, literally, you can say, I did what you said, and this is now happening, right? You don't have to find the words to describe it. And sometimes that's an advantage, because when you describe it with your words, you're now associating patterns of weights that you don't know mean what you want, right? Because that's how that happens. Yeah, I have more to say, but somebody else jump in. We've been hearing from me for a lot.
Well, and I guess the final component for the concept of AI first, for me anyways, is the thought that not only should I go to AI first when trying to ideate or come up with the solution to whatever question that's popped in my head, but that I should be aware of how many times am I going to do this, right? So the general rule of thumb that I've seen across the internet now is, does it take more than 3? Are you going to do it more than 3 times? If so, automate it. So I would add on that little bit on part of any AI first kind of plan, because like in our own processes for the show, I've run into situations like, oh, all right, cool, I can make that more efficient and cut down the amount of time to do this. And then I'll get to this point and be like, I'm doing this 5 times a week. I really should build an automation for it. And then, of course, everybody runs into that problem. It's like, oh, yeah, I'll take care of it after I do everything I need to. It's like, oh, and then, I forgot to build that automation. I better do this. I'll just do this the regular way until I do it again. So I guess that's what the weekend's for. My point is, everybody, when you think you have to build the automation right then. Otherwise, you may never get to it. I
want to add that you do that. Like you're talking about like specific. You're right. I mean, for specific tasks that are very similar area. You brought up the show, so you do a lot from or do all the audio. Right now, I put the newsletter together. Right now, Beth does shows and show descriptions and stuff, and these roles have moved around over time. But that's a great example. I mean, the newsletter, for example, it's pulling in information from transcripts that was from audio, these shows, right? That we get a recording from, that we pull a transcript from, then goes through several different processes before it actually ends up in a newsletter in a slightly different format. And the way it started with me was, yeah, absolutely. But I would just start in a chat, and then I would go back to that chat. I would just put a little emoji on that chat icon. There's a little tip for anybody. If you don't want to lose a chat in the thread and you're not ready to make it into like a full-fledged custom GPT, put an emoji on it, on the name of the chat, and it's very easy to find because you'll lose it immediately if you use it a lot. So I have everything organized that's newsletter related is organized with a certain emoji. But like you said, Jimmy, like over time that can turn into just full-fledged custom GPTs. That's the next order of business. Like, okay, well, this prompt is pretty, for me, I will use it several times in the regular chat to see that it's great. And then I will then wait and use some of the best responses. They become your examples and your few shot for your custom GPTs, right? So then you go, you say, well, I'm just, to your point, I'm going to go create this custom GPT to make it even easier on me because now I can share it with Beth. Now I can share it with Jimmy, right? And you guys could use it just as easily as I could. Well, then I go in there and I'll write the prompt out and spend a little more time with it, use some of the best examples, put them in there as examples in the thing. And now I have something, hopefully after a little bit more testing, that is just automatic. I put in the transcription. It's going to go through several different phases. There's going to be human elements to it, obviously, and it's going to bring something back that is close to what we want to have in the newsletter. The other side of that, though, is it doesn't have to be that structured. You could say, every morning I want to brainstorm. Well, that's a task, but it's not like it's outputting the exact same thing because the output of the brainstorm might be different, but the input is the same. Well, that is also a place where you could say, hey, if I'm going to do this 2 or 3 times, or maybe I want to make this a habit, that is also a great place to start thinking about creating structured prompts or repeatable prompts that you can go back to over and over again, because you're going to go back to and have those conversations. So it doesn't have to be specifically like the newsletter example. It could be much more fluid than that and still be a really good use case for why you would go back and maybe use the multimodal, like Beth was saying with the images or anything like that, throwing them in there. Let me jump over to you, Beth.
Yeah, so I have something a document that I want to share. It's from the Understanding Multimodal AI, A New Frontier in Artificial Intelligence from Silicon Valley Center. We'll pop a link in. And this is talking about the ways that multimodal would identify patterns in visual or patterns in audio, right? Spectrum analysis for audio, which turns audio into a visual medium and then looks at the patterns of the visual medium. What is key about this is that language models don't actually pay attention to words either, right? They're paying attention to patterns of tokens. And the probability within patterns of tokens are based on proximity as a probability thing. So white fence or white rice is more likely than white Halloween. I don't know. I'm just trying to not go somewhere because I did not mean to pick that, but there you go. So that's how this works, right? So a visual audio spectrum would show also probabilities that sounds move toward. This is saying to understand images, You could have a photo app recognize faces by identifying patterns that make up facial features. This is a good face. This is not a good face. And if you've been paying attention to image creation apps, you know that's been a really hard thing, right? Okay. The other way that multimodal AI impacts things is on when the fusion happens, right? So the fusion is recognizing the pattern and turning it into a tokenized or word-based thing that can be processed with other modes, right? Audio becoming transcribed into text, now becoming added to a description of a screenshot, right? So those are things. I might upload a screenshot and say, hey, I want to talk to you, ChatGPT, about this. Can you explain the process that's being shown in the process map in the screenshot, right? So those would be fusions at the front end. That's early fusion. Late fusion or intermediate fusion obviously happens later in the process, and hybrid fusion is a little of both. But that's something to be paying attention to, both when you are speaking to something or you are choosing something, you're presenting an image, or when we get the ability to just like whip around our phone in our environment and talk about that. But the other piece of that is when you are building or having something that you're engaging with based on a build. The first thing you want to know when you're troubleshooting is, where is the fusion happening in the process? When is it happening? And you may not be able to know that. I'm not sure I know that in ChatGPT. But those are key points in this. And I would say personally, I am excited about being able to talk out loud to an AI and have a conversation back and forth. That's probably the mode that I use most often. But I am also excited about the possibility of being able to talk out loud, include something that I drew on my iPad as like a random weird sketch of a screen or an app front-facing UI or something like that. Be able to grab a screenshot or several screenshots of an X conversation, right? So those are images now, and pull all of that into a conversation that I want to have out loud. Like, this is what excites me about this. You can pull from the ways that you are engaging in an information exchange world and have a conversation with an AI who's able to process all of that as well.
And I wanted to expand on that. One of the parts that you're talking about was being able to take the screenshot, right? So when Apple came out with their research paper about their model that can read your screen actively, that got me really excited, because that anything that lessens the amount of physical steps that I have to do to communicate with the model or communicate with another tool, I really like to focus on those things, because it allows me to just be quicker. You know, I can start getting closer to, doing things in the world as fast as I'm thinking of them, right? So having the computer vision, right, or the AI vision, being able to look at the screen that I'm looking at, and then I can just ask my question that popped in my head about what's there, that's extremely efficient. That breaks down more of those barriers for me to get the answer that I'm looking for, or get more additional insights, or even in the ideation process. Like Beth, you talked about writing it on your iPad or drawing it on the iPad. It's like, oh, hey, I have this idea about this and that and whatnot. And if the model can just see what I'm doing, right? Turn it off, on, whatever I need to do. But if it can just see what I'm doing and give me feedback as I'm doing it, can you imagine for a creative who's drawing or just trying to come up with an idea, and they're just like, oh, okay, I want to build a house or anything like that. Oh, what's missing from here? And getting that kind of feedback. It's like, oh yeah, I should try to do that. The client says they want, they want sunlight coming in from the west. I was like, oh, okay. So let me draw that on there. And then they get to the level where the model can interpret your image, iterate on that, send you back an image, and then you can manipulate the image they send back. And this is all done in a fluid manner. That's going to be a fantastic tool or a fantastic feature to work on. So from that kind of stuff, I'm getting really excited. If I can just draw in like some basic shapes and it will merge two creative pieces together because of that. Well, you think about film, right? If you've got a big chunk here, it's like, okay, all I have is an animatic or I have a storyboard and I haven't created that imagery to fit scene A and B together. Put that in there. Okay, you have all the parameters of my entire project. Can you generate some sort of fill for that, or generate a cutaway, or generate, a sub scene that is the same people from A moving, doing some camera movement, so I can establish, from my wide to my close or back and forth, those kinds of things where you're filling in or you're creating those interstitial pieces. That's the kind of level of creative ideation that I'm looking from it. And this is what you'll get from multimodal models. And so
right.
Not quite there yet, but we can see all the elements. We can see, the computer vision is going to recognize it. We know that the models can interpolate, compare, right? And so we know all of these elements are there. It's just about getting to that next step. And that's kind of what I'm really looking forward.
So Friday's show is about Replit and coding in Replit. The ability to take like you saw, I think you saw, Replit will say, hey, user, it's at this level, go test it, right? Let me know what's happening. And I could go ahead and test it and say, okay, so in the third row, there's a thing that's off, and where everything looks like a cube? Well, this, the cubes go down and then over and then down and then over. I was doing a word find creator. It's so much easier to say, screenshot. You see where the yellow persists? Make that state change, right? Like, how much longer would that have taken to try to describe that in words? And the whole thing is taking so much less time. That's visual communication that takes an action on your behalf.
I'm going to say from more of a business use case, what I'm noticing with our clients are doing is more of the translation side. So if they reach a different audience they have a target audience who, let's say in a community or different areas of the world, what we're doing is one video, being able to translate it, being able to dub it, and providing them that opportunity to reach that audience without having to hire another or create multiple videos. Because one of the things, it's always been like this for a lot of companies, like, oh, how are we going to translate? How are we going to reach this type of audience when we can't reach them because they speak a different language? Especially that's a global audience, or even local businesses that have, whether it's like real estate, even construction. It's like, hey, providing instructions like, hey, we need to do this in your neighborhood. This neighborhood is primarily these people who speak these languages, right? So how are we gonna reach them to ensure safety, just to make sure we cover our bases? So those kind of things, that's a lot of primary what we're doing. The second thing that we are noticing too is more from an audio front, where we're trying to introduce, and a couple of our clients have taken up on this, where a lot of their instructions are starting to become more of an automation front. So they talk to, say, in Slack or Teams, and then we create an automation. It comes back to them in Slack or Teams. So they say something, automate. They come up with whether it's a script or messaging or maybe a brief, a proposals. They get that, and they have the starting point, which instead of actually typing it through, we've created it. So those are the pieces. But I think what I'm really excited about is is the next level piece where, whenever we get that advanced voice mode plus the updated language models, whether it's O1 or whatever the next iterations of those are, once you start being able to speak in real time against, let's say, your business, whether, to me, that is a big shift in how you interact online and how to interact businesses and interact with you, and you interact with the businesses. Because instead of you trying to find stuff on said website, you can just use your voice and just say, hey, how much do you cost? What's this? What's this? What's this? And because it's trained on the corpus of that business's knowledge, and businesses will need time to adjust to this, essentially, it's a customer service 24/7 without having to hire customer service. And we're not talking about replacing people. We're talking about the high level stuff, which most people kind of just want initially. And then after that, then you can talk to your sales rep or whoever to get that more in-depth flavor, has a lot more context. Although with some companies, they're saying that, like Salesforce agents, we can replace it entirely. I'm not sure where that's going, but I know that's a really cool, forget even cool, it's so much easier than me having to go to websites, go to search, or even go to Perplexity and find all that stuff out. I can just, hey, I just want to talk to said business and just have that back and forth and see if it's really for me or not, or whatever that is. So that's an interesting direction if we go that path.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that would be, I think that would be really cool. It's like, I can't think of every website I would want to do that with, but then there's definitely websites where you think, a conversation would actually be easier here, and getting, because it's maybe not straightforward. I'll give you an example. There's a company that I love called Source One, which is, they changed their name not too long ago, maybe a year or two ago. But anyway, they're one of these companies that extracts water moisture out of the air. They literally have zero infrastructure around them. They use a solar panel. The solar panel, and the way it does it, it basically creates water droplets and moisture underneath it, and that collects. And it's literally pure water out of the air, and it's filtered and all that kind of stuff. But it's not extracting the pollution, right? It's pure water out of the air. So when you think about the implications, and they have put this in rural places in Africa as well as other places that are arid or whatever, and I think it's one of these solutions that can have truly profound worldwide impact. And they're not the only company doing it, but I just happen to like them. Well, they offer a lot of like sort of more technical stuff on their website, and I could read that, but when I think about what you're saying, Karl, I like the idea of, like, I can just have a conversation to better understand where the company is coming from and like what their strategic thought is about doing whatever. There's so much stuff that gets buried into annual reports and so on and so forth, but is actually public knowledge. It'd be great to be able to extract that back. Not only, I mean, obviously from a sales side, right? I always have that hat on, but also just from a knowledge standpoint of, maybe this is a company I want to invest in, and I want to better understand what their strategic plan is, because maybe I'm going to invest in them. Maybe I'm going to invest in a competitor of theirs, but I want to invest in this technology. And so asking questions against that website would be super, super cool to be able to do that. And then there's other websites where you go, I don't know that I would necessarily go voice first, but that's kind of the point of this whole conversation, right? It's the idea that whatever the right mode is of communication, that in time we will be able to probably use whatever best fits the solution, as opposed to a AI one size fits all solution, which is really, really cool. It becomes personalized.
I think the next level for that, because you got the voice aspect, is then you got agentic features, right? Because then if you controlling the agent with your voice, be like, okay, there's some websites that I won't engage in conversation with, but how about there's some websites that are like, hey, I need you to book this, or I like this shoe, I want to buy it, or I want you to review this and give me like the cheapest option, put it all into, a universal cart so I can see which ones I want to purchase. And then it's all in the cart. It's like, I want this one, go with number 7. And then, you've got that voice application. So to me, that's the cool part of it, is you got voice, then the actions related to it, then we're getting into like, wow, that changes it. So I think first level, you have the capability to talk to everything and show like, hey, I want a shoe or something that looks like this, or I want a house that looks like this, or hey, I'm trying to like your company, I think this is what it is. Does this make sense? Oh, yes, it is. But then to take action on it, which is kind of, people would think that's far off. I don't think we're talking within a year or two, right? That ability to use voice to take action, then multimodal becomes, I don't even know what that would be called. So I'm pretty excited about.
Jude calls it the Iron Man experience, which I think at first I was thinking the race when he first said that. I was like, oh no, Iron Man, I got it. So, no, I think everybody wants the Jarvis, sort of Iron Man experience. I had two quick thoughts here. One, I've mentioned this before, that I think one of the biggest potential of using any of these AI solutions in any of the multimodals is the ability to think from other points of view. And of course, we think about that when it comes to like religion and politics and all these, social aspects of life and stuff. But also sometimes you're just trying to think through a problem, but you need a different perspective because you want the AI to put a different hat on and look backwards. So much of what we had up until this point in history is, well, I can write something out, but clearly it's through my own bias, and not in a bad way. It's just clearly through my own bias, my experience and everything else. And I'm going to write it a certain way. Now I can take that report, I can give it to a superior, I can give it to a coworker or anybody else, and I can say, what do you think about this? And we can have that conversation, and maybe Beth is nice enough to give me really detailed notes back on maybe what I wrote, and I make it better from there. Well, you could still do that, but you can do it very, very efficiently using AI by simply saying, hey, act as. And that's just something that goes back to the earliest days of prompting when we talked about prompt engineering. Act as, which is saying, go put this hat on. And not just like a broad hat, but a specific hat. I want you to act as a CRO in this size company, in this part of the world, with these types of struggles and pain points, right? I'm making the language model go to a certain point. Now it's wearing that hat, and I can get it to look back at me the other way and say, how would you take, or how would you input or take in the information that Brian wrote? I no longer have to just be constrained by just me. So whether you're having a conversation, Beth, we were laughing about this. I always say, I often pick up my phone and use the voice mode of ChatGPT, and I just do laps around my kitchen because I have an island in my kitchen. It just makes a nice little path from basically this office to the front of the back of the house and back again. And I will do laps. I've carved into the tiles on the floor, but that just gives me a way to kind of move a little bit and think openly, and kind of, I don't know, I feel like it unlocks my brain. But oftentimes when I'm doing that, at some point I'll say, okay, I feel like I have had enough back and forth. It's time to get the AI to look at it from a different perspective, which is something I inherently cannot do, right? So it's a different way of using AI to do not only brainstorming, but also unlock abilities that are probably beyond your own bias in the way you're going to do it, because you're going to get something back that perhaps is a different take on it. Now, we will talk a little bit more about how this can be applied tomorrow on the show with O1 Preview, because it's a reasoning. It's been the way they did the model, they put more time into the inference and the thinking side of it. The thinking, it's not thinking, but the thinking side of it is the easiest human terms to think of that as on the back end, and how it's going through the steps. That could also be a really important tool for what I just mentioned, because you can have it lay out a process. You could have maybe over the course of 3 days had conversations with ChatGPT, gotten it from 3 or 4 different angles, then take that information, and now you have this new model where you can go, how would this actually deploy? How would we actually put this into service or practice? How would we move the ball forward with this? I need your help thinking through the steps, given all this information. But guess what? You have like 3 or 4 days worth of conversation with multiple viewpoints already built from GPT-4o that you can move over. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow, but some really, really interesting ways to use these models to truly get a multimodal experience.
Right. So tomorrow what we're talking about is O1, Strawberry becoming O1 Preview and O1 Mini, which is when you'd start the process up front. What Brian was also mentioning and walking around his island was that at the end of that conversation with that model of that persona, you could actually say, hey, I'm feeling a need for some marketing content. Go ahead and describe which of your colleagues is most skilled and what their skills are, which is why they're the right person for me to talk to. Right? Now they've given you the description of the next instruction in the conversation. Hey, you're blah, blah, blah with these top skills. And you can see I've been talking to blah, blah, blah. This is one of the reasons that I name my persona LLMs, like, you are Sam and you are a Salesforce automation master. Or, like that kind of thing, so that becomes a variable that means that level of expertise and special skills. But it's, yeah, you can chain these and let your AI tell you what the next handoff is.
And I want to bring this up. Jude just had this comment. Yes, artificial reasoning. What's the potential success rate of this solution? Okay, so this actually brings me up to point number 2, which is the power of it being wrong. The power of it being wrong. So what do I mean by that? Well, just because what ChatGPT or any of these language models produces for you is incorrect doesn't mean it was a failure. So think about the blank page problem, right? You have a blinking cursor blank page. You got a couple options here. You can just start trying to put your thoughts down and move things around or whatever. Or you can go with an AI solution. You can say, hey, help me flesh this out to get me going, get me 80% of the way so I can put my human brain on this, my expertise to it, and do the last 10, 20%. Now, let's just assume in another area, it was wrong. What your brain is doing, though, is immediately pointing out the things that it knows is wrong, which what does that do for you? It in turn tells you where to change it and make it right. So even if a language model is incorrect, or as you're saying, Jude, what's the potential success rate of this being a solution, the success rate of this solution? I know I had one experience over the weekend, or actually on Friday, because I was doing it for Scale's newsletter, two different newsletters, my company newsletter that goes out on Monday mornings. I was putting in a sales 01 preview thing. We can talk more about that tomorrow. But here's my point to it. It wasn't like fireworks. It was good, but it wasn't fireworks. It wasn't like, oh my God, let me deploy this to everybody I know tomorrow. But it gave me a really great place for my brain to jump off and go into other areas. And I go, oh, it's wrong, but that's a good idea. Like, it wouldn't work, but you know what that makes me think of? Boom, 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 boom. So wrong answers with language models to me aren't worthless. They're just another way for it to trigger our expertise to go in and do really, really cool other things. And my wife has had this experience quite a lot lately, where she's been using AI for not parts of her job, but parts of her reasoning, what she does as a dietitian. And the same thing she said, I'd much rather have a wrong answer than a blank answer, because I can pick it up from there. I'm smart enough to pick up the ball from there and run with it. And she's absolutely right. She's absolutely right. So I just wanted to bring that up, that I don't know what the success rate is, but even a bad answer is probably still a good answer in some way, depending on how you use it.
There's one more. I just wanted to address this comment in terms of from Mike, I guess, when I think the comment was, spoke with a client about integrating AI tools to help kids with autism. Some of our thoughts on, new methods for helping kids with autism develop their communication. So what's really cool about this is there's a lot of new opportunities from a communication side with just using GPT-4o voice and, various prompting techniques to see how you would interact depending on, the spectrum of autism that this child, the kids have, the individual child has, and how you would, treat that, and how would you interact, and how would you get an AI to help with that in terms of communication. But if you think about what's happening in terms of reasoning, like I'd be very curious from a test perspective to take voice, which you have now, with O1, and how that would actually, try it to see what the O1 model would think about. It's like, like a prompt for this child is on this spectrum of autism. How would you develop program? How would you engage or implement that interaction? And then they would interact. But then it'd be kind of cool to see what it comes up with and what the techniques are versus just regular GPT-4o and how that would work out. And the only way to do that is to test it out, because we really don't know how it would engage with that and if it's better or not better. I really don't know, but I think there's so many cool possibilities. And just the last final story is that my father-in-law is starting to develop Parkinsonism, and part of that is to go to a speech, I think, therapist, or I don't know what the term is, but then you can use ChatGPT voice to help with that if they can't reach, because they couldn't reach the speech pathologist they couldn't book the appointment, but they could do those exercises in the meantime before they get to see the specialist and go through that. So there's a lot of opportunities from a medical field, not even just from a business field. So I just want to see if we can answer that question.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And the last one I'll bring up, just because it just came in as you were talking, is from Gwen. Thanks, Gwen, for joining us, by the way. What's scary is What's scary is the least experienced less experienced not knowing what a bad answer is. In relation to what I was talking about. I agree, Gwen. And look, there's the people who don't do trust but verify, the people who don't put human in the loop are going to have bad answers out there, put bad stuff out that doesn't fly. Obviously, in my use case, I'm talking about people who are already have expertise in their field and know what bad looks like. Then it's obviously super helpful. But yeah, absolutely. It is scary because there's tons of people who are just blindly believing whatever is coming out of ChatGPT. And look, that is a hard lesson to learn, whether you're a professional or you're a student or whatever, or like we saw, months and months ago, probably over a year ago with the court cases where it hallucinated court cases that didn't exist. And I think it ended up getting lawyers fired or whatever the case was. So yeah, it all goes part of it, right? I mean, if you're going to use AI, then you should be signing a contract with yourself to say, I'm going to trust but verify. I'm going to go look at the sources. I'm going to go back this up, especially if I don't have expertise in this area and know better. So that would be my answer to that. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up there. Like I said, tomorrow, we've already said this, we're going to be talking about O1 preview. We'll even talk about O1 mini and talk about a little bit about where they differ, other than just cost, why you might use one or the other. And then a lot of the use cases that we have seen come up over the last 5 or so days since it was released, because we're seeing more and more innovative, interesting ways of using the model, which, by the way, is why OpenAI said they wanted to put it out in the first place as a preview, because they basically said, well, we don't know, you guys tell us. So now you have a whole group of people around the world who are doing just that. So it's really fun to see all the new ways. And we'll talk all about that tomorrow. Then, of course, the rest of the week, we have all sorts of different shows coming up, from the news to everything else. So come on back the rest of the week and hang out with us. Newsletter just went out yesterday. I mentioned that during the show today. If you want to be part of that newsletter, you can go to dailyaishow.com and you can sign up for that newsletter. I was just thinking, guys, I was talking to my wife and saying we need to have a QR code that pops up on the screen that automates part of that process for them. So I think that's something that we'll have to maybe work on, and we can pop something up on the screen. That'll be super cool. So, all right, that's it for today. I hope everybody has a great rest of your Monday, and we will be back tomorrow to talk about O1 preview. Until then.
Aloha.